Attack on Titan is a really important show to many. Personally, I started watching it in 2020, so I guess I'm part of the hype train, even though since its inception it's been a hype train. But to me and many others, Attack on Titan is a really important show, taking the spot as my personal favorite show of all time, and many others. There are so many great things about Attack on Titan, but there is a big controversy within it. With such a massive story like this, it definitely was hard for Isayama to make the most meaningful ending. This ending had a lot of time and care put into it, as confirmed by him and his editor. The original ending was changed multiple times. I'm sure there are many theories about what these endings could have been, but that's not what the topic of this video is about. Instead, this video is going to be addressing the controversy that is the ending to Attack on Titan. When the final episode was released, there was a lot of hype surrounding it, but now that the hype has died down, we can more clearly understand everything. Let's look at Attack on Titan, the finale, after the hype. Firstly, what's the point to an ending? The point of an ending is, well, yeah, to end a story, but it's a little bit more than that. It's tying all loose ends and resolving everything. Now, resolving doesn't mean all sunshine and rainbows. It doesn't mean all good endings are happy. Look at the ending to Breaking Bad. Personally, I don't have a lot of enjoyment watching Breaking Bad, but as someone who's watched the whole show, for some reason, its ending is really good. The worst thing a movie can do is either change the way characters act with no reason at the end, just to conclude it, or to have things go unresolved. There are other points to making a good ending, but this is one of them. So let's apply this to Attack on Titan. This video is going to be a little bit of a journey, a little challenging. But let's think. What loose ends did Attack on Titan have before the ending that needed to be tied up? Firstly, and most obviously, the rumbling. The show can't end halfway through the rumbling and not show what happens after. This one doesn't need much explanation otherwise. It needed to conclude its characters, as well as the character relations. Going into every character would take time, so I'll use an example. John and Reiner. John, as we know, watched his friend Marco died, and later finds out it was at the hands of Reiner. With Parody teaming with the Warriors, this conflict between them was unsettled. Another was Zeke. Levi had some unfinished business with Zeke after what happened to Erwin, and with Levi promising he would kill Zeke, something had to happen. He didn't necessarily need to kill Zeke, rather resolve it in some kind of way that made sense. Once again, this whole resolution thing applies to all characters, I'm just using a few examples. Now, Eren, Armin, and Mikasa, the main characters, of course, are the most important ones to resolve. After Eren beats up Armin and Mikasa in Season 4 Part 2, one could infer that he did so to push them away, maybe because he wanted them to stop him, maybe because he wanted to go rogue, and this is based on everything before the ending. Either way, despite there being clues left, it needed to be resolved. And for Eren, because he's the main character, being the main focus for most of the show, he needed some kind of reasoning. We know why he launched the rumbling, but even Parody were opposed to the full-scale rumbling that Eren triggered. His actions were somewhat understandable, but needed a little bit more clarification, especially considering he's the main character. Something also needed to happen to the rumbling, which relates to Eren. The rumbling needed to end or to be stopped. As well, the Titan powers should be removed at the end. Attack on Titan shows that the cycle of violence never ends, no matter what. So if the Titan powers were never removed, the series could go on forever, or it would just end at a weird point. How all these things should be resolved can't be determined with a formula. We can only create possibilities and see which fits best, but we don't need to, as Attack on Titan has officially ended. Let's see how Attack on Titan tackles this massive ending, and see what kind of loose ends it ties. One thing I personally really liked, especially when I read the manga a few years ago, was the Battle of Heaven and Earth, and how the Ancient Titans returned. While some were there for cool cameos like Eren Kruger doing his iconic boat splitting with one of the Armored Titans, it added a layer of despair, especially to Reiner when Bertolt reappeared. Before I go any further, let's talk about Armin and Zeke. When Armin is swallowed by a Titan and sent to the past, he meets Zeke. This is the first and last time they have an interaction. And in my opinion, it is at least in the top 3 greatest scenes of the entire show. Zeke has an ideology that nothing really matters, and at this point in the story, he fully gives in to the ideology. He accepts the rumbling can't be stopped, that he won't ever return from the past dimension, so he just accepts his fate. He goes on to talk to Armin about how the meaning of life is simply just to reproduce, that there is no further meaning. This makes sense to Zeke's character, considering his euthanasia plan. It all kind of relates, but Armin has an opposing ideology. Armin believes that the meaning of life is a little bit more abstract. On a day many years before that time, he was racing Eren and Mikasa to a tree. And to him on that day, that was the meaning of life. Another day he fed a squirrel, and on that day, something as simple as feeding that squirrel became the meaning of life. He reaches into the sand and pulls out what appears as a leaf to Armin, representing the tree that he raced to, but to Zeke it looks like a baseball, like the one for him and Cassava used to play catch. And it's at this part where he delivers possibly my favorite line of all time.
何の意味もない。でも確かに俺はずっとキャッチボールをしているだけでよかったよ。
This is such an important moment for the show, and it's also an incredibly important moment to Zeke. He glances over and sees the dead past ancient titans, including Cassava. It's here that he asks for their help, where they manage to take control of their hardened versions of their titan. Zeke manages to return, but as he is still needed to be in contact with Eren, half of his body is missing, and the half that is there is glued to part of the bone to keep in contact with Eren so he can continue the rumbling. He admires the view before being killed by Levi. I'm telling you, I strongly believe that this is the perfect ending for Zeke Yeager. With all the death he's caused, all the trauma he's faced, all the horrible things he's endured, as well as Levi's burning hatred for the man, it created a perfect character death. When he's killed, the rumbling is stopped, making his death even more important. I seriously believe this is the best character conclusion in the entire show, in terms of how well it resolves so many things. Next, since I mentioned it, let's look at Reiner and Jean. We all know how much Jean resents Reiner, but there comes a point where he realizes how pointless it is to continue hating Reiner. He even saves Reiner from certain death. It's basically Jean understanding Reiner, leaving it in the past, and facing Eren, who he not only resents, but also needs to help stop. It's the definition of putting aside their differences to face the common enemy. Now quickly, I'm just going to talk about something I didn't really like that much in this part, the whole Falco situation. The first time I read the manga, this part was awesome, but after rereading and watching it animated, it made me realize that Falco is sort of a plot device in this episode. He has real feelings that all of his family members had died, but it isn't elaborated much after the beginning of the episode. He says he can turn into a bird, or hints at it, then turns into a bird, then he's a bird, then he flies around like a bird, and he just seems like a convenience. As well, why did Lady Kiyomi allow such a great gamble? I'm not saying it's impossible that she would allow it, but at least elaborate on it a little bit. Maybe an extra scene as a flashback would have been good at this part. And the last thing I want to talk about before moving on from the Battle of Heaven and Earth is Annie. I think Annie is an amazing character, it's just that her relationships with everyone is missing something. We saw Annie and Armin, and it was a really important scene when they connected, but all the other people, except for maybe Levi, are just perfectly okay with her being around. Listen, I get that Reiner is also working with them, but I would argue that Reiner had a lot more thought put into his relations with the group. But other than that, I have absolutely no complaints about Annie. So before we move on, I would say that the Battle of Heaven and Earth is solid. It meets up to every standard that the episode has set before, and most people who didn't like the ending never really complained about this part. A lot of the hype was also around this part of the episode, especially people who read the manga like me and wanted to see it animated. But let's move on to the slightly more controversial stuff. I would say after Zeke gets killed is when people started to not like it. Not the main thing that people didn't like, only where most of the complaints begin. So the one who detonates Eren's neck and decapitates his titan is Jean. I think this is perfectly fine, as first of all he doesn't die yet, and also that Jean and Eren had always had an odd relationship like this. Then, Armin thanks all the past ancient titans and finally transforms. At this point, they kind of thought this would kill him, so I think this part was really well done. He finally accepts that he has to kill Eren and explodes the body. This basically ensures that if he were using the Warhammer's power, wherever he was hiding would also be destroyed. Going back to why I think it was okay why Jean dealt what was thought to be the killing blow, was because he literally said he didn't think it would be enough to kill him. But I forgot to mention the source of all living matter, which came out of Eren's head. This entity has always been really cool to me because it's really where all the Titan lore comes down to, and it's never really explained why this thing exists, so in a way it's like a Lovecraftian entity. Reiner wrestles it, which is an interesting moment. How I interpreted it is that he's fighting himself, the version of him that wants to become a great warrior. The very thing that gave him the warrior status was the source of all living matter, so this is him fighting his other personality. I'm sure there are other interpretations, but that's just how I saw it. Now the next part is weird. Weird not as in bad, just more like I forgot about this part every single time I reread and forgot about it when I rewatched it for this video, until I got to it. It's the part where the source of all living matter causes a bunch of the Survey Corps to turn into pure Titans. It's a really great part and shows even more sense of urgency to killing this source of all living matter. I don't have anything against it, it's just personally isn't memorable to me, To me, it sort of felt like Isayama was paying a tribute to an icon of the series, which are the Pure Titans, which I totally understand, and this part was pretty decently important. Let's talk about Mikasa. Now we're in complaint territory. Everyone is mad at Isayama and is apparently trying to make us think that Mikasa had plot significance, even though many fans are insistent that she didn't have any plot significance. Mikasa has had plot significance from the start. Her and Eren's dynamic were basically the most important dynamic in the show. It greatly influenced Eren's actions and made for interesting scenes, including the one where Eren asks what he is to her. After Eren transforms into his colossal titan form, he gave Mikasa a vision of if she had maybe responded differently to that question all that time ago. One where they live in a cabin peacefully, but Eren still had his titan powers in this memory, and says that he'll die soon, so he tells Mikasa to throw away the scarf he gave her. This is a really important moment in helping Mikasa let go of Eren. The whole show, Mikasa has protected Eren, as Eren initially saved her, but after this final vision, it was clear to Mikasa that she would have to be the one to kill Eren. And this scene speaks for itself. Just quickly, I wanted to talk about Ymir, the girl who loved an evil man so much that she served him for thousands of years after they both died. Seeing Mikasa kill Eren was Ymir's way of realizing that even though Mikasa loved Eren and likewise, she still ended his life, she was able to, and it made Ymir realize that she can finally let go of King Fritz. So real quick, I'm going to talk out of chronological order to save the best or most controversial for last. Levi sees his fallen comrades, a great moment, and lives the rest of his life in a wheelchair, realizing that the cause he fought for finally got resolved. Annie returns to her father after her promise to come back. Reiner returns to his mother. They all recover all the loss they had from the journeys, so on and so forth. Now the part you probably clicked on this video for. The final part. This is Eren's conclusion, so it's the most important to not fuck up. Well, it turns out Eren didn't know what the hell he was doing. Okay, that's not entirely true, but it's what people say. Now, the first thing you have to consider is that Eren is living all of his timelines at once. He has all the knowledge from his 18 or 19 years of living. The way he acts is adult and kid at the same time. Eren was okay if he had got stopped, but was also okay if he fulfilled the rumbling, killing everyone outside of the walls. Because while yes, the cycle of violence never ends, he knew he'd gone too far. He saw all the memories from Historia's hand. And Eren also just has flawed ideology. While yes, I 100% agree this whole thing is messy, this part was pretty okay. Then Eren says he wants Mikasa to love him. He says it in a really pathetic way, and I don't really just say this, but everyone knows it already. Once again, because he's basically a child at the same time as an adult, so he breaks down. But this also shows his true emotions. He really does love Mikasa. He was just so invested in his plan that he had to push her away, and it really affected him. My personal interpretation is that he wanted everyone to seem equal, quite literally. He used the word flatten, not destroy or decimate or kill. Maybe he wants everything to be on the same level, figuratively and physically. There was a part that I don't really recall from the manga, I don't think it was in the manga, where Armin says he also wanted to see everything flattened. Upon first watch, this didn't really sit right with me. Armin was always the one who fought for what was right, but he also has deep emotions. He grew up being bullied his whole life, so some theorize that he wanted to see everyone dead, just as a thought. But what's important about Armin is that he didn't give in to this desire, or vision. He claimed he always sort of wanted to see everything flattened, and while he never had the Founding Titan to fulfill such a vision, he still opposed Eren and his idea of flattening the world, and used his Titan ability to stop him. Eren and Armin wanted the world flattened at least a little. The difference is that Eren succumbed to this desire while Armin pushed it aside. He knew what was best. I would also like to point out how they omitted the line where Armin thanks Eren for becoming a mass murderer for their sake, which I was 100% in favor of. The only part I didn't like was the use of the word hell. Attack on Titan has used terms like devil, even when saying Erwin becoming a devil for humanity's sake, but that isn't quite it. Erwin did what was best for his soldiers, but he also had a selfish goal. He was willing to risk all of humanity just so he could find the secrets of Grisha's basement. So when Hanji enters the afterlife, which doesn't look like hell, why would Eren be there? If Armin said he would go to hell, and why would Floch be there? By that logic, shouldn't he go to hell too? I feel like saying they would meet in the afterlife would have been a better line, rather than hell, And maybe the word hell is used in like how the word devil was, but they never really used the word hell in any of the other part of the show. At least not in the translation that I watched. I also feel like the Dinah plot twist was a little weird and hope that they would remove it from the anime. Maybe Eren is just so far gone, but this was literally his motivation. Even at the end of Season 4 Part 2, he used his mother's death as motivation to distract him from the fact that he would be killing so many lives. This event of Dinah not eating Bertold and eating Eren's mom was foreshadowed, and it was also revealed that it wasn't so it could eat his mom, rather to save Bertold, but I still think it's stupid. But I will give it the fact that it makes Abnormal Titans interesting. Maybe Abnormal Titans act the way they do because of the will of the founder. I think the story could have gone without this plot twist, but maybe that's just me. So after all that, is it a good ending? It indeed is a bittersweet ending. Eren had to die. It seems like that was the best way for things to end. A lot of things were a little messy, and that isn't really opinion-based. It's more like Isayama had a really complex story with a complex climax, so it needed a complex ending, so everything seemed a little bit messy. I know I've expressed my personal opinion a lot in this video, but it's hard to say if everyone will like it. Based on what I can see, a large amount of people dislike it, and it's sort of easy to see why. People had an idea of who Eren was in their head, and seeing him act as pathetic as he did hurt some people, genuinely. Most people loved it up to that single chapter. Some people feel like Mikasa never had any plot significance until the end, which I guess is fair, although I really don't get why people can't see how significant Mikasa has always been. Personally, I think this ending was a really good conclusion for such a dark story. And even after the ending and all of its controversies, Attack on Titan is still very loved by the fans. Thank you for watching this Peak Stasis video. If you enjoyed this video and want more like it, please consider subscribing or checking out my other content. Thank you all, and I'll see you in the next Peak Stasis video.